I was compelled to work with Laurie-Ann. We had a 90-minute session where I got to pick an expert's brain about what to do and how to do things, from how to have an intro to your speaker tab to on your website, to about how to find people to speak to and really brainstorming things like that. So overall, it has really lit a fire underneath me to be able to go out there and speak and find things to help people.
You've probably heard a lot of people talk about doing ideal client interviews, but how will that actually help you in your business? Today, I want to share with you how I recently did some ideal client interviews when I was doing a copywriting course, and how I was able to actually shine a light on some of the information that I didn't know my ideal client was actually thinking or feeling, and what I did to resolve this. You can also, as a speaker, like, this is important information for you to be using with your audiences. So let's get on to the show.
You're listening to Be in Demand, the podcast for honest advice, inspiring stories, and ideas for growing your business by leveraging the expert that you are. I'm your host, Laurie-Ann, business mentor, and I'm also a reformed painfully shy girl, red wine lover, and exercise enthusiast. Join me as I share how being positioned as the expert in your industry, even if it's a busy one, will help you stand out and be the one in demand to hire and work with.
So for those of you who might not be aware with, like, what is doing an ideal client interview? Like, why would you do that? This is really marketing. It's really doing market research where you are speaking to people who are your ideal clients and actually just gleaning information, really being able to figure out, like, what are the words that they actually use. And when I did some recent ideal client interviews, I discovered something very interesting. One of the questions that I asked was, what is a signature speech? And I got a variety of answers, which light bulb went off for me, which was, Laurie-Ann, you have got to teach and talk more about what a signature speech is. Because here I am, I'm talking about a signature speech. I even have a program called In Demand Signature Speech. And there's a bunch of people out there, when they hear the word signature speech, they think something different, or they're actually don't know what it is. And it's one of those, well, I'm a confused buyer, so they just pass on. They could just keep moving. So that was something that I learned, was that part of my audience doesn't know what a signature speech is, doesn't know how they can use a signature speech, doesn't know why they need a signature speech. So I wanted to share with you why you want to be doing some sort of ideal client interviews every once in a while. And I'm not talking every time you pivot. And I'm not talking every 5 or 10 years. I'm talking you actually probably should do some ideal client interviews, at least a couple each year, so that you're staying in touch with the exact wording that people are using. That's the important part, because this is all part of, when you want to really touch people with your copy, it's because you know what they're thinking. You know the words that they describe their pain point, the words or the feeling that when they talk about it, like, this is the solution. This is how I'm going to know that I've arrived, that I've solved this. It's because you're using their exact words. And then they say to you, it's like you're in my head. It's like you can read my mind. And that is the same thing, not only in your written copy on your website or in your social, but imagine saying the exact words in a presentation, on a podcast interview, on a live stream, when you're using the actual words that your ideal client uses also. Imagine what that would do. So hopefully I've convinced you or re-sparked this idea. Maybe you've done some market research before. I did some market research when I first came into the online world, but I gotta say, I didn't have the right questions. As a matter of fact, I've done this 3 times. This is the 3rd time that I've done this, and I'm going to share some of the questions because I've really evolved with the questions that I now ask people. And I want to share some of those with you so that you can actually learn from my experience. And then I'm going to share with you exactly how I'm using this in my speeches, in my presentations, and also in my content that I am sharing not only here on my podcast, but also like social media posts. The first question that I ask people is, why do you think you're my ideal client? I want to hear them tell me why they feel that they are an ideal client. And that just really helps me figure out, like, are they really an ideal client or not? Another question that I added this particular round of doing interviews was, what are some of your top values as a buyer? Not only just in your business, because it's really easy for people to share what their values are for their business, but I want to know what your values are as a buyer. And here's why I'm asking that, because my type of ideal client values value, values their time, values quality. They're not just looking for some run-of-the-mill program that has like a gazillion people in it. They're not just looking for, I'm not the sort of coach that puts well, here's my formula for a presentation. Let's just insert, like your words here, and here, like a Mad Lib. I'm not like that. So I want to make sure that my ideal clients value their time, value working with somebody one-on-one, value quality, value like really getting to know the person. Because if you're in a 6-month coaching program with me, you're going to get to know me really well. And I'm going to get to know you really well also. And so being able to have that intimate relationship, that's important to me as well. And so I started asking my ideal client interviews, what are some of their values as a buyer? And then I go into things like, like what's frustrating for you in your business? Have you ever used speaking before? And for the people who said yes, tell me a little bit about the results. Being able to ask people like questions like, what's it like to struggle with getting visible, being positioned as the expert, getting in front of your ideal clients, being able to, like, what does that look like? And really dive deep into having them really almost paint a picture for you. And what does it look like? What does it feel like? If you had this problem solved, what does that look like? What does that feel like? And just get like gathering those words from like, so what's hard about speaking? And one of the answers that I heard a lot was, and I've never worded it this way. They talked about, a number of people said, how to know I'm in the right room. And I thought, wow, like, so I would use the word like audience or stage or, like associations. Like I never used the word, like how to know, like to be in the right room filled with your ideal clients, to be in the right room speaking and sharing to an audience filled with your ideal clients. I never used the word room until I did this recent round of ideal client interviews. And that's a word that the number of people actually used. Then you just start asking people like, well, what's your vision for your business over the next 12, 24 months? And so another thing that I would hear a lot of people say is they want to have a bigger impact. They want to be able to talk to more people. Like they are on a mission. So because they're on this mission, they know that if they can talk to a group of people instead of just working with one client at a time, that they could have a bigger impact. Another thing that I say is that speaking needs to be redefined. And so on a couple of the interviews that I did, there were some people like, wow, I do podcast guesting. I never considered that to be a form of speaking. And so I was really able to also open people's eyes up to what other possibilities of speaking there are that they probably hadn't even thought of. And so how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you can get really good at speaking on like podcasts, which is something that I'm going to be sharing in my 2-year anniversary that's coming up, you get really good at speaking on podcast. Well, why can't you transfer that skill to another area such as live streaming, to another area such as speaking on stages, whether that's in person or it's virtual? There are so many different opportunities for speaking. But this is all the information that I was actually able to glean because I took the time to do these ideal client interviews. And so I really want to encourage you that if you haven't done ideal client interviews in a long time, consider doing them. There's lots of Facebook posts. You could actually even ask some of your clients, where do they hang out, so that or maybe they'll even introduce you to some of their besties so that you'll have some people to actually do some interviews. You don't have to do a ton of interviews. Trust me that as soon as you've done like 4 or 5, you're going to start hearing some of the very similar same answers again and again and again. Now, here's one of the benefits that comes from doing these ideal clients. And I'm such a connector. So that's why this is actually a beautiful thing for me to do. I really enjoy having deep conversations with people. And even though I'm the one who's interviewing them, it's still a deep conversation. And now, because of some of the ideal client interviews that I've done, I met a few people that were down in Florida. And guess what? Like, we have a place down in West Palm, and I frequently go down there. So I'm going to be visiting some of them. I'm going to be arranging some lunch dates or coffee dates to actually meet these people in real life. I've been able to have some people on my podcast. That was another thing that came out of this. I made some really great friends too. And actually, one person is not only been on my podcast once, I also already have a second interview scheduled with her. And actually, some people who have already told me, I want to be in your next round of in-demand signature speech. Like, they finally realized through the course of like me interviewing them, they were like, wow, I'm really overlooking this. I'm really making my life and my business so much harder when I could be speaking. And it could be so much easier for me to actually be speaking directly to their ideal clients, their prospects, because speaking is the gift that keeps on giving. And you've heard me say before, over and over again, speaking is the fastest way to grow your business. So that's what this whole podcast episode was about, was really, I wanted to share with you about what I learned from doing ideal client interviews. And if you haven't done them, I really want to encourage you to do them as well. I would just sit down, and whether you snag some of the questions that I shared with you already or come up with your own, but definitely use those first couple. Why do you think that you're an ideal client of mine? And what values do you have, like not only as a business, but I also asked them as a buyer. When you look at your buying behavior, what values are there? Like, what values, like be able to, because that way, when you're writing social media posts, you can actually be speaking to the values, especially if they're the same values that you have. So I want to encourage you, like, feel free to use some of the questions that I shared with you here. But maybe also just like sit down and just think about that journey that your customer, your client goes through, where they were before. Like, what's that pain? What's the problem that they had before they met you, before they used somebody like you? And then take them and then what is that afterwards? We want to speak to the identity of that future person, not just, hey, here's the pain that you're having, and I can solve your pain. But for me, you're a struggling entrepreneur, you're a struggling coach or a consultant, and you want to be known in your industry. You want to be visible. You want to be that person who people are talking about. So you're that, what I call, because I call everything this, in demand. You're that person that people are talking about. It's not get me a health coach. It's get me Mary Jane. What I want is when somebody says that, like, two people are talking to each other and I need a speaking coach, and the other person says, I know exactly who you need. Laurie-Ann Mirabito. I just got booked for a speaking event. I need to write a speech. You need to reach out to Laurie-Ann Mirabito. Like, that's what I want. So that's the in-demand entrepreneur. So we want to speak to the identity of that person who's like in the future version of those people who work with you. So I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. I would love for you to, if you want to continue the conversation, you can reach out to me over on Instagram, DM me. My handle over there on Instagram is Laurie-Ann.Mirabito. That link is down in the show notes. And if you want to have more of a conversation and you're curious about, well, you know what? I actually want to craft a presentation. I want to start speaking and having a bigger impact. then I want to encourage you, like, book a call with me. Chatwithla.com. The call will cost you nothing. And actually what we'll do is we'll end up having a great conversation because I'll ask you a bunch of questions about you, your business, your vision. And then I'll share with you some of the programs that I have that would be appropriate for where you are and where you want to be so that you become that in-demand entrepreneur. So again, that link to book a call with me is chatwithla.com. And you want to get on the list because pretty soon I am going to be sending people over to a wait list. So until next time, I want you to all be in demand.
Thanks for hanging out with me. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And join me over in my private Facebook group for more tips, community, and free trainings. You'll find the link in the show notes. You can also help this podcast reach more listeners by leaving a review. And as a thank you, each month I pick one of my reviewers to win a free coaching call with me. So if you haven't done so already, please leave a review and you could be the next winner.